From an episode full of questionable homophobia to an episode featuring Michael Jackson, these are the episodes of The Simpsons that are not safe to watch. We're kicking off our list with Homer's Phobia, an episode featuring Homer engaging in some attitudes that, shall we say, have not aged well. So the Simpsons need cash because Bart destroys the dryer and screws up the gas line, leaving them with a $900 repair bill. And of course, the Simpsons do not make that kind of money. So Marge decides to sell this old Civil War doll to this quirky collectibles shop, Cockamammies, which is run by John, this super charming guy with a very flamboyant personality. But turns out her precious heirloom is just a fancy liquor bottle. But then the next morning, Homer's like, hey, John's great, let's hang out with him and his wife. Marge casually drops the bomb that John's gay. Homer, not so thrilled. In fact, he's downright horrified and immediately starts acting weird about John just because he's gay. He even refuses to join this fun, weirdly morbid Springfield tour John set up. Meanwhile, the rest of the family doesn't care and has a blast with John. He's a good guy. This is when things start to get a little weird. Bart starts wearing Hawaiian shirts, playing around in wigs, and eating strawberry cupcakes instead of chocolate. All of it convinces Homer Bart's turning gay, and now he's gotta fix him. First, he tries making Bart stare at the cigarette ad with sexy women. Next, Homer drags Bart to a steel mill because, you know, real men stuff. Oh yeah, all the steel workers are gay, and during breaks, the place turns into a full-on disco. Yeah, Homer's not coping well with how many guys are comfortable with their sexuality. Desperate, he takes Moe's advice and goes deer hunting with Bart, Moe, and Barney. When they can't find any deer, they try to shoot the reindeer at Santa's village, but the reindeer go berserk and attack, so even that doesn't work. Just as the guys are about to get attacked, John shows up like a total hero, scaring off the reindeer with his creepy Santa robot. Homer's shaken but finally thanks John, sorta accepting him for who he is. On the ride home, he even tells Bart he's cool with him being gay. The episode hasn't aged that well, but at least Homer eventually came around to understand how wrong he was. Our next episode is actually banned in many places, due to it starring one of the most controversial stars in history, Michael Jackson himself. It's Stark Raving Dad. So the episode kicks off with Lisa reminding Bart about her birthday, and he immediately gets distracted. Instead of shopping for a gift, Bart decides to call Krusty's hotline, ignoring Marge's instructions to watch Maggie. Naturally, Maggie almost gets hurt, and Bart shrugs it off like it's no big deal. Meanwhile, Homer's white shirt turns pink in the wash because Bart's red cap sneaks into the machine. Instead of fixing the problem, Homer rocks up to work in pink and immediately becomes a target for everyone's ridicule. Mr. Burns is convinced Homer's a free-thinking anarchist and sends him for a psych evaluation, which seems a little much for a pink shirt. Homer lets Bart fill out his take-home psych test, and Bart checks all the boxes without a second thought. Next thing you know, Homer's declared insane and shipped off to a mental institution. At the asylum, Homer meets a patient who claims to be Michael Jackson. Yeah, Homer has no idea who Michael Jackson is, so he just fully believes him. Of course, that's a big reason this episode is so controversial, given Jackson's, alleged interests. Anyway, the two hit it off, becoming unlikely friends. Meanwhile, back home, Lisa's birthday is completely overshadowed by the drama, and she ends up celebrating alone with Maggie, feeling forgotten. On the big day, Michael calls the Simpsons to let them know Homer's in the asylum. Marge works to get him released. She convinces the doctors that Bart's antics, not Homer's, are the real problem. Homer isn't insane, he's just an idiot. The asylum is shocked. They assume Bart was a figment of Homer's imagination. With Homer freed, he invites Michael home for a visit. Bart, convinced they've got the king of pop coming to their house, blabs to everyone in Springfield. Soon a massive crowd gathers, only to be let down when Michael turns out to be an overweight white guy. The crowd disperses, angry, and Lisa is crushed when Bart admits he forgot her birthday gift. Lisa's so upset, she writes a letter disowning Bart, but Michael encourages Bart to make amends by writing her a song, even helping him do that. After some bickering, they create the sweet Happy Birthday Lisa, which melts Lisa's heart and earns her forgiveness. In the end, Michael reveals his real name is Leon Kompowski, a guy from New Jersey who adopted the Michael Jackson persona to spread some joy. He leaves singing the song, and absolutely nothing is really resolved. But our next episode, Homer the Heretic, is no less controversial if you're religious. It's all about how great Homer's life is when he doesn't go to church. So it's a freezing Sunday morning, and Marge is determined to drag everyone to church despite the blizzard. But Homer, not a chance. He stays home, ripping his pants in the process, and crawls crawls back into his cozy bed to sleep a little more. Sounds like a dream. Marge braves the cold with the kids to head to church, while Homer ends up having the best day ever at home. He cranks up the heat, dances in his underwear, makes some ridiculous moon waffles, wins a trivia contest, watches a boring debate get interrupted by football, and even finds a penny under the couch. He's truly living his dream. Meanwhile, Marge and the kids are freezing in church. The furnace is broken, Reverend Lovejoy's droning on, and by the time they try to leave, the door's frozen shut, leaving them trapped in church. When they finally get home, shivering and miserable, Homer cheerfully declares he's had the best day of his life because he skipped church, and that does not go down well. Marge is horrified, even more so when Homer announces he's done with church altogether. Bart's totally on board, which only makes Marge more upset. That night, Marge prays for God to intervene. Meanwhile, Homer falls asleep and has this trippy dream where God shows up. At first, God's mad, but Homer lays it out. He works hard, loves his kids, and doesn't see why he should spend Sundays being told he's going to hell. Which is fair. Even God kind of sees his point and lets him off the hook for now. So Marge, Lovejoy, and even the Flanders try everything to get Homer back to church, but he won't budge. He's basically got clearance from God. Another Sunday rolls around, and Homer's home again, smoking a cigar and flipping through Play Dude. But then disaster strikes. The cigar sets the house on fire. Homer passes out in the smoke, and here's the twist. It's Apu, Krusty, and Ned, representing different faiths, who come to his rescue. Lovejoy later points out that God wasn't punishing Homer. Homer has a change of heart. He agrees to give church another shot, though he ends up sleeping through the service. In his dream, God pops in again, giving Homer a bit of comfort about his complicated relationship with religion, and also giving him an end date for his life, so that's nice. Religious controversies aside, there's a pretty great message in this episode, and our next episode also has a good message. Although the racial stereotyping has been, controversial, it's Homer and Apu. So Homer buys some expired ham from Apu at the Quickie Mart, eats it, and unsurprisingly gets food poisoning. Dr. Hibbert thinks it might be a voodoo curse, which sounds ridiculous, but it turns out Patty and Selma are practicing voodoo on Homer, just not on his stomach. Anyway, after recovering, Homer marches back to complain, and Apu gives him expired shrimp as an apology, which is actually a good deal in a weird way. Homer eats it, gets sick again, and this time he's had enough. That's when Kent Brockman gets involved, using his investigative journalism and a giant spy camera hat for Homer to bust Apu. Apu gets caught on camera selling spoiled food, and the Quickie Mart fires him on the spot. They replace him with James Woods, who's method acting for a movie. Fired and guilt-ridden, Apu insists on doing chores for Homer to balance his karma. At first, it's awkward, but eventually, the Simpsons start to appreciate Apu's culture and traditions alongside their own. Still, Apu misses his job, and Homer, feeling sort of responsible, offers to help. They set off on this wild trip to the Quickie Mart headquarters in the Himalayas. When they get there, the mysterious master of the Quickie Mart sits in a white temple sipping on a squishy. But Homer blows all their chances to fix the problem by asking 3 versions of, "Are you really the owner?" Apu is furious, but they head back to Springfield empty-handed. The whole trip was just one massive waste of time. Back home, James Woods gets caught up in a robbery at the Quickie Mart. Apu, being the hero, saves Woods, but ends up getting shot in the process. Grateful for Apu's bravery, Woods pulls some strings and gets him reinstated as manager. The episode wraps up with Apu recovering in the hospital, surrounded by the Simpsons family, who now see him as more than just the guy at the Quickie Mart. This episode is very typical, with Homer learning a valuable lesson that he will almost certainly forget. Homer's Odyssey has Homer genuinely struggling in the throes of depression. It's surprisingly dark territory for the Simpsons. So the episode starts with Bart on a school trip to the nuclear power plant. Of course, he gets in trouble, ends up singing in front of the bus, and sits next to Wendell. Meanwhile, at the plant, Homer's lounging around in a motorized cart, eating donuts. He ends up causing an accident when Bart calls out to him, and boom, he gets fired. To make things worse, the supervisor who fires him is Sherry and Terry's dad, so Bart is extra humiliated. At home, Homer's depression starts to set in. The family's supportive at first, with everyone encouraging him to find a new job, but after a long day of rejection, he's back at Moe's, broke and defeated. Later, he vents to Marge about his fears, and she offers to pick up the slack by going back to her old roller skating waitress job. The next day, Homer's left all alone. He spirals spirals massively, just laying on the couch, unresponsive, even when the kids try to cheer him up. It's a bleak vibe, and one of the few times the show has genuinely shown depression in its reality. Then, after a Duff commercial triggers him, Homer hits a low point. He steals Bart's piggy bank, smashes it open, and realizes there's not even enough for a beer. Feeling hopeless, he decides to end it all. He writes a tearful goodbye note and drags a giant boulder to a bridge, planning to jump. But then Marge and the kids find his note and rush after him. Just as Homer's about to jump, they call out, and he saves them from a car at the intersection. This moment of heroism gives him a spark. He realizes he can make a difference. Suddenly, he's on a mission to improve Springfield's safety, starting with that dangerous intersection. It snowballs into this full-blown campaign, and Homer finds purpose again. Eventually, his activism leads him back to the power plant, protesting for better safety. Mr. Burns, seeing his passion, offers Homer the role of safety inspector, a job that lets him channel his newfound purpose. Homer accepts, but immediately falls off the balcony during his victory dance. The crowd catches him, cheering as he's carried off triumphantly. Homer finds his way back from the brink. Unfortunately, it's in a job he is not at all equipped for. At least the episode didn't make a joke out of Homer's depression. However, he really betrayed the fans and became the most hated episode ever made. It's the Principal and the Pauper. So Springfield's all set to celebrate Principal Skinner's 20 years of running the school when a random guy shows up claiming he's the real Seymour Skinner. Turns out he's not kidding. Agnes even confirms it, and then Skinner, well, fake Skinner, comes clean. It all goes really downhill from here. Turns out his real name's Armin Tamzarian, but his whole backstory is wild. He used to be this troublemaker kid in Capital City until he got busted by a judge and had to choose between jail or the army. Naturally, he picked the military and wound up in Vietnam, where he met the real Skinner. Then the identity theft started. The real Skinner became like a mentor to Armin, giving him purpose and discipline, but when the real deal went MIA, Armin visited Agnes to break the news, and she just assumed he was Seymour, and he kinda went with it for 26 years. But now exposed as a fraud, Armin quits his job, ditches Springfield, and heads back to his old life in Capital City. Meanwhile, the real Skinner steps in as principal, and let's just say, it's not going well. He's all military hardcore and no fun. Like when he chews out Bart for goofing on the Pledge of Allegiance. Even Agnes can't stand him. She misses Armin, who, for all his flaws, never talked back to her or caused drama. Everyone agreed, fake Skinner might be a fraud, but he's their fraud, and he's way more likable than this Sergeant Buzzkill. So the Simpsons hatch a plan to bring Armin back. They find him in Capital City, living a sad little life, and try to convince him to return. At first, Armin's all, nope, you've got the real guy now, but Agnes steps in, dropping the ultimate mom guilt bomb. She loves him like her own son, and that seals the deal. Back in Springfield, the townspeople rally behind Armin despite pushback from Chalmers and Quimby. The real Skinner tries to fight it, saying he earned his place through sacrifice, but Springfield isn't having it. They literally tie him to a train and send him packing. Judge Snyder makes it official. Armin gets to keep the Skinner name and job. And just like that, Springfield hits the reset button. This may be one of the only times that The Simpsons just ignoring everything that happened is a good thing. While the Burns cage does a similar thing, forcing Smithers into a romantic relationship that doesn't necessarily fit. So Smithers and Mr. Burns go skydiving, things go horribly wrong, Burns blacks out midair, and somehow falls right through his parachute. It's a total disaster. Smithers, being the ever-dedicated guy he is, jumps after him, catches him mid-freefall, and saves the day. After this literal life and death moment, Smithers decides it's finally time to confess his love to Burns. But of course, Burns doesn't even acknowledge it. Smithers is crushed and spends his time moping around the power plant, supervising Homer, Carl, and Lenny in a total funk. The guys figure out what's up and decide the best way to cheer him up. Naturally, Homer throws a party and invites every gay man in town via Grindr, but Smithers isn't feeling it. He's over the whole scene. He grabs a drink and leaves, and that's when he meets Julio. Sparks fly, and suddenly Smithers is smitten with this guy. Things move fast. Smithers quits his job, and the two decide to start fresh in Julio's homeland, Cuba. Meanwhile, back at the plant, Burns is having a total meltdown. Turns out no one can replace Smithers. Every assistant he hires is a disaster. His lawyers tell him he's got no choice. He has to bring Smithers back. They just can't go on like this. Meanwhile, in Cuba, things aren't so great either. Julio realizes Smithers isn't actually over Burns, and the relationship fizzles. Heartbroken, but also maybe a little relieved, Smithers heads back to Springfield. In a sweet moment, Smithers and Burns finally sit down for dinner and patch things up. Burns doesn't exactly declare his undying love or anything, but they reconcile, and Smithers is back where he belongs, at Burns' side, even if it's not romantic, which it isn't. It is weird as hell though. But this next episode sends Homer where he's never been before, high as a kite on marijuana. It's weekend at Burnsies. So it all starts with Marge planning a garden to avoid genetically modified food, but things go sideways fast. The Scarecrow is the real problem here. After dealing with crows and even Flanders praying at her Scarecrow as if it's the cross, Homer destroys the Scarecrow one night, mistaking it for an intruder. And wouldn't you know it, the crows decide Homer's their leader. At first, he thinks it's kinda cool. He commands this murder of crows, but then they cross a line, almost dropping Maggie from the sky. Homer freaks out, tries to break up with the crows, and they attack him. Next thing you know, he's in the hospital with his eyes all stitched up. Dr. Hibbert prescribes Homer medical marijuana to help him deal with the pain. Homer's not thrilled, but eventually he gives it a shot, choosing between a wizard bong and a skull bong. And boy, does he dive headfirst into stoner territory. Not like he has much of a choice. Homer gets super into it. He's singing Smoke on the Water while toking in his room, tripping out, and even finding joy in Lisa's saxophone playing. Although, he also thinks it'd make a great pipe. So yeah, he's spamming Marge with rambling calls, watching TV with Otto, and somehow even getting promoted at work. Marge tries to roll with it at first because it's for his eyes, but she's less thrilled when Homer turns into the poster child for weed culture. Things come to a head when Homer, stoned out of his mind, signs Flanders' petition to ban medical marijuana, thinking Flanders is just doing a Wiggum impression. By the time Homer goes to a pro-weed rally, it's already banned. His eyes heal and he promises to quit, but not before giving his last joint to Smithers, who promptly smokes it, dresses like Judy Garland, and do I even have to say it's weird? Then there's this whole thing with Burns almost drowning. So Homer and Smithers weekend at Bernie's him at a shareholders meeting, but then the puppet act accidentally restarts Burns' heart, saving the day. But Burns loves the marionette ideas so much, he makes them keep doing it as punishment. So yeah, I guess it's all back to normal. Once again, everything that happened in the episode, completely useless. While in Marge vs. the Monorail features Springfield at its worst, committing crimes left and right. It's pretty crazy, but it's something. So it all kicks off when Mr. Burns gets caught dumping nuclear waste in the park. He's slapped with a $3 million fine, and Springfield gets to decide how to spend it. Naturally, the whole town loses their minds with suggestions. Lisa wants virtual reality headsets for the school. Bart dreams up giant mechanical ants to destroy it, and Homer wants a billboard saying no fat chicks. So everybody has something valuable to offer the town. They hold a town meeting, and everyone pitches their ideas. Fixing Main Street, hiring firefighters, or more cops. Apu's tired of getting shot, but Chief Wiggum thinks he's just being dramatic. Even Burns tries to weasel the money back to the plant, disguised as Mr. Snurra, but that doesn't fool anybody. Then this slick-talking guy, Lyle Landley, struts in and pitches the ultimate promise, a monorail. He sells it with a song because nothing else gets the people going, and suddenly everyone's on board, except Marge, who's like, shouldn't we fix Main Street first? No, Marge, the mob has spoken. Landley's shady vibes fly under the radar, and even Lisa the skeptic gets charmed by him. Meanwhile, Homer, inspired by a ridiculous TV ad, signs up to be the monorail conductor. 3 weeks of laughably bad training later, he's got the job. Marge, still suspicious, finds opossums in the monorail's fire extinguisher cabinet, and decides to dig deeper. She discovers Landley's real plan, pocket the cash, leave Springfield with a death trap monorail, and escape to Tahiti. She rushes to warn everyone, but it's too late. Landley skipped town. In North Haverbrook, Marge finds a ruined ghost town, the victim of Landley's previous monorail scam. A local scientist, Sebastian Cobb, spills everything. Landley cut corners everywhere. His advice? Springfield better hope their conductor knows what he's doing. Well, thank goodness they have Homer Simpson. Obviously, the maiden voyage quickly goes off the rails, literally. The monorail's out of control, speeding dangerously while Quimby and Wiggum bicker over nonsense. Meanwhile, Karma catches Landley when his flight to Tahiti makes a stop in North Haverbrook, where furious locals ambush him and presumably end him. Back in Springfield, Cobb advises Homer to create an anchor to stop the whole thing. Homer somehow manages to save the day with a giant donut from the Lardlatt statue. In the end, Marge reflects, the monorail was Springfield's last big mistake. Well, except for the escalator to nowhere, and all the other mistakes. Well, at least Springfield finally got rid of that death trap, by which I mean Homer as a train driver. Our final episode, Lisa the Vegetarian, is proof of what happens when Lisa forces her beliefs on everyone else. So it all starts with the Simpsons at this painfully dull kiddie amusement park, and everyone's bored out of their minds, except when they hit the petting zoo. Lisa gets all gooey over the lambs, and you can practically see the gears turning in her head. Fast forward to dinner, and Marge serves lamb chops. Lisa's like, nope, can't eat that. She keeps hearing the lamb's voices every time she looks at them. When Marge offers alternatives, Lisa pieces it together. All meat is animals. Boom, instant vegetarian. The next day at school, Lisa's vegetarianism doesn't exactly win her many fans. She refuses to dissect a worm, which triggers an independent thought alarm. And the cafeteria's only meatless option is a plain hot dog bun. Even the faculty mocks her. Principal Skinner's convinced that the problem lies elsewhere. Springfield's education. Things get worse at home when Homer announces his big BBBQ. Lisa tries to stand her ground, but Homer and Bart taunt her with a little song. You don't win friends with salad, which is true, but also harsh. By the time the barbecue rolls around, Lisa's had it. She shows up with gazpacho, only to be laughed at. Then Homer rolls out the pièce de résistance, a roast pig. That's Lisa's breaking point. She steals the pig, drives off with it on a mower, and sends it flying into the stratosphere after a wild chase. Naturally, this doesn't go over well. Homer's furious and sends Lisa to her room, but she's too mad to apologize. Out in the world, Lisa's ideals take a beating. Mocking classmates, meat ads everywhere, and her family's cluelessness push her to a breaking point. She even grabs a hot dog at the Quickie Mart in frustration, taking a bite and yelling out, well, yes, because as Apu reveals, it's a tofu dog, totally meat-free. Apu, being a vegan, takes Lisa to meet Paul and Linda McCartney on the Quickie Mart's rooftop garden. Apu reminds her that it's okay to stick to her ethics, but she can't force them on others. Inspired, Lisa makes peace with Homer. They're both too stubborn to admit they were worried, but they finally reconcile. She stays vegetarian, Homer gets it, and all's well. Except for that roast pig, which is still flying through the sky. It's actually kind of majestic.